POV, you're walking down the streets of Detroit. Okay, that's it. That's the whole episode. No, I'm kidding. No, okay, so you're in Detroit and you're walking down the street, okay? And you've seen big cities like this before. What's out of the ordinary here? Big murals over there, skyscrapers over here. Yeah, okay, sure, got it. But then, what is that over there? Oh my god, could that be a tensile structure? Let's go see. Let's go take a look. You get a little closer. Oh my god! Oh my god! What is that? Welcome to ARCHWOAH with Mason O. This is a story about a city that was once super opulent, flourishing. It was one of the top dogs in the country until somehow a bunch of factors in the economy crumpled it up and it started to undergo decades of decay. And now currently it's rebuilding itself very slowly year after year. Quite the history. And so if there's ever been a place that was cleared out, how did something like this get here? That is very interesting. So let's say, ARCHWOAH, how did Detroit get this? So let's talk about part one, the rise and fall of Detroit, the Motor City. Part two, the architecture itself, obviously. And then part three, the future of Detroit. Okay, so here we go. So let's say part one, the rise and fall of the Motor City. So you probably already know how epic Detroit is. It was literally the city where Henry Ford built his first automobile and headquartered the Ford Motor Company. Okay, do you have any idea how much the car changed human history? Yeah, okay, so here's America, massively changing in shape and form to completely accommodate for this everyone now having a car. Automobile culture working its way into every pre-existing way of life. Which, by the way, does that remind you of any other major technology that's changing the way humans behave and interact with their world right now? Anyway, so all this money being made from the introduction of the car culture, all of it is being funneled primarily back to Detroit. That's where Ford is headquartered. So Detroit has got big money right now. It's like 1920s-ish through 1950-ish. They've got big money, they got big buildings, they've got big mansions, big architecture, big event venues. Detroit is the fifth largest city in the U.S. at 1950. That is a huge deal, okay? But then comes the industrial decline. How is this possible, and what am I talking about? Well, it's never one thing. It's a combination of bad things happening all at the same time over a series of decades, and now Detroit looks like this. And I just want to point out, isn't it remarkable how you can clearly see with your plain eye how buildings were designed here to catch your eye, do the most with money, and be gorgeous and extravagant, and yet at the same time you can see how they got repurposed and reformatted and ultimately boarded up, even though that original decorative facade still remains just left to decompose. It's not that hard to notice if you keep your eye open. Anyway, so Detroit has undergone a long period of urban decay, and it's complex to explain, but we need to know the essential factors. It's a combination of urban sprawl, the fact that 60% of Detroit's economy was based on car manufacturing. That's a lot of eggs in one basket. A ton of racist legislation that started happening. This is just to name some of the top few, okay? So all of these ugly realities played out over a couple decades, and when we look at Detroit in the present day, it's trying to recover from all the declining that it did, and we see that with revitalization efforts all over the place. Big economic corporations are pulling the team together and saying, what buildings and projects can we build that will make a big splash in Detroit, and then the ripples from that project will start to spread out little by little and help the rest of Detroit improve. Okay, and that's how, bam, we get this absolute ballerina of a building. Gonna be the city's new central hub for all public transit. Okay, here we go. What did they design? Part two, the architecture of the Rosa Parks Transit Center. They were like, we need to design something breathtaking that will promote a futuristic view for Detroit, right? And I think they achieved that. I mean, the first thing I have to say is that it is very difficult to understand this project just by looking at it, which is why we are going to unpeel this thing layer by layer so that we can understand the engineering. So let's try to peel back the layers here. Even though the structure doesn't play hide the ball with each component, with structures like these, they're so graceful in the way that they're designed that you kind of just can't understand the assembly from looking directly at them. There's an art in the obscurity where you have to say, man, how did they do that? It seems impossible at first glance, right? And that's the beauty there. So here we go. So we're going to look at just one bay, and then at the end, we'll see that the bay just gets multiplied 7 times. So we're going to start out with the primary structure, which is our 2 masts. So we have 2 masts, and we're going to call this an A-frame because the position that they're in puts them in an A shape. Normally you hear the term A-frame and you think it's one of those A-frame houses or one of those Whataburgers where there's just the steel posts that are in this upside down V shape. But they have called this an A-frame, even though that I'm not so sure that it completely matches with other A-frames throughout architecture. But either way, they are the primary structure and they make up this letter A shape. So you'll notice that at the top and bottom of the A-frames are these slots so that the end of the tension cables can get attached. Okay, so look at that. They are down here at the bottom as well. So we've got our A-frame and they're both anchored to the ground. Something that the engineers have designed is that it is not perpendicular, the letter A. If we hide this, we can see how the base of this one is not in the same plane as the base of this one. By skewing it, they just make the whole entire thing a little bit more interesting without having to change anything. So let's bring back our fabric here. Okay, so we've got our A-frame and we've got them anchored to the ground. They have designed a really interesting shape for the foundational base of the A-frame. It's 8 feet tall. It's hard to tell that from this model, but a person standing up against this thing, their head would not even hit the top. So we've got one anchored on this funky rectangular base. The other one goes all the way to the ground and is just on a foundation that is tilted at just the right angle. So if we move forward, we've got our masts. They're anchored into the ground. They each have 2 rings. One of the rings is attached via these brackets, but the other ring is suspended with cables from the bracketed ring or the top of the cable. So let me make that make sense. On mast number 1, the upper ring is suspended from the top of the mast like this, and the lower ring is just attached via the brackets. However, on mast number 2, let's look at this. This guy is attached to the upper ring. The upper ring is attached with brackets, and then the lower ring is suspended from that upper ring. So the beauty is that you'll never see any... It appears as if the ring is suspended from the mast. It's truly beautiful, and I honestly wouldn't have minded if the lower ring had those brackets, but even I had to do a double take because I was like, wait a minute, how is it even attached? It's suspended from the upper ring, which is hidden by the fabrics. So when you're standing down there, you can barely see it unless you're really right underneath it and then look in there. So pretty incredible. And of course, as you know, as you're able to figure out, the exact position of this ring, the exact tensioning of the cables fine-tuned the fabric to make the exact final result shape. And of course, that'll be relevant again later when we get to all these little tension wires out here. So we've talked about the rings. Now we've got to talk about the big boy, the truss. This thing is insane. If we look at only the truss, let's look at this like this. If we look at only the truss, the first thing we notice is that it's a very funny shape. It's like some sort of like deformed banana. And the way that they achieved it is by putting a major element, let's do like this. They put a major element here, here, and here, and then they space framed everything in between. So if we want to hide the fabric at the top of it so we can see inside the space frame like this, the space frame follows a pattern of doot 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 all the way down, and it allows for this funky banana shape to be achieved. And I don't understand why this funky banana shape was necessary for the project, but it obviously adds some visual pizzazz to the whole project, because when you're standing at it down here, it's not symmetrical on both sides. Beautifully as well, the trusses are suspended from the top of the mast like so. Boop and boop. So there is nothing below the trusses supporting them. So we've got the trusses. They're a very weird shape. They're suspended via cables, and they are space framed. Next, we're going to talk about the most popular girl in school, the fabric. The fabric actually catches rainwater. This is a beautiful ecological design that they added in there. I'm so glad that they did so. And inside of the whole entire structure is some hidden rainwater collection systems that I could not see and did not model. But I understand that they're there, and that was a big part of this design. So the fabrics are finely positioned to create this shape. They aren't symmetrical because of the fact that the whole thing is skewed, but they are mostly the same idea, which is square base down here and then ring pull on the other end. So the exact tightness of this ring, the distance between these two trusses, how much this is suspended, that's what allowed them to create the fine shape. And obviously, this was tested at a smaller scale so that they could be precise about the final shape that they wanted. Okay, and so the final component now are the anchor bases. There are many of these throughout the whole project. There's 3 on this end, there's 3 on the far end, and there's 1 every time the mast repeats. But these burly guys are very heavy. They're 8 feet tall, and they are also positioned in just the right way that they can balance out the weight of the suspended elements. So I've modeled them to where they're kind of in a perfect little line like this, but in actuality, this one is like over here and over there. This one is a little more like this, and this cable actually reaches all the way to that second truss. But the point is, for modeling sake, to keep it all in one easy view, that's what I've done. But the point is, these were positioned precisely so that this shape and this artistry could be achieved, and then the whole thing would remain balanced because they're weighted down to the ground. Incredible. I mean, just incredible. So last but not least, we we made the perfect bay. We got everything balanced. The tension is perfect. Now they said, okay, so how many bays can we get with 22.5 million? And 7. So they just copied and pasted it 7 times, and this is the final result. I did not model these guys on the other side, but you understand that they're there, and this is what we look at from the top. This is what we see when there's 7 of them side by side. Of course, as you understand, one beautiful element repeated many times creates an exponentially more incredible result. So here we are walking underneath this thing now, and what an experience that is. So let's build it, let's make it real, and let's see what kind of impact it's going to have on Detroit. Part 3, the future. Let's talk about the future. What happened between this project, 2009, and right now? Did this project uplift run-down nearby properties? Has Detroit officially entered into its futuristic era? Is Detroit public transit now robust and completely reliable? I'm being kind of sarcastic because we all know that one project does not achieve these things. Attitudes of the citizens, the political powers that be, and many, 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 many instances of beloved buildings will all weave together to create a complex final result that is a city of some certain quality, okay? And the good news is, if we look at the committee who spearheaded this project, this is one of the many items on their catalog since the 1970s, so we're getting a little bit better every day. My last question to you is this one particular striking landmark contributing positively to the growth of Detroit? You may have said that with $22.5 million, maybe we could have spent a little less on aesthetics and spent a little more on functions and logistics of the transit hub. It's pretty hard to know for sure unless you ask Detroiters what they think. They're the ones who live next door to it. And what's the next best option after that? Go to Detroit! That is a great idea. And then, when you're there, take the bus from the Rosa Parks Transit Center. That is the best way to get a little bit closer to answering these questions.